I'm sure you've noticed America's place in the world is kind of upside down right now. Donald Trump berated Ukraine's president in the Oval Office on Friday. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev tweeted that he loved seeing, quote, the insolent pig finally get a proper slapdown in the Oval Office. And by the way, he was referring to President Zelensky, not Donald Trump. Putin's longtime spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, came out and said publicly that U.S. foreign policy now, quote, largely coincides with our vision, as in the Kremlin's vision. And I don't know that I've ever said this before, but Dmitry Peskov is absolutely right. I mean, just today, NBC News confirmed that the White House is pausing all military aid to Ukraine. And Reuters reported today that the Trump administration is also drawing up a plan to potentially give Russia sanctions relief. So, yeah, Donald Trump really is going all in on helping Russia, while simultaneously inflicting as much pain as he can on our closest allies. Today, Trump confirmed that 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada will go into effect at midnight tonight, just a couple hours from now. And as you know, that won't just hurt them, it will hurt you, the American consumer. And that fear was reflected in the market today, with the Dow closing down nearly 650 points, thanks in part to this.
On the tariffs, is there any room left for Canada and Mexico to make a deal before midnight? And should we expect those Chinese tariffs, the extra 10%, to take effect tomorrow?
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
Joining me now is Chrystia Freeland. She served as Canada's finance minister and deputy prime minister under Justin Trudeau. She's now a candidate for prime minister herself. It is great to see you. You could be, which is pretty incredible to say out loud, you could be the prime minister this time next week. Tariffs, of course, are going to be a major issue. You've suggested Canada should fight back in a very targeted way. You've been very forward about that. You've pushed to target Wisconsin dairy farmers, Michigan manufacturers, Florida oranges, to name a few, as a way of really specifically hitting states that are politically key to Donald Trump. You know what gets to his heart there. How far, for people who are watching, are you ready to go on tariffs? They're gonna be put into place in a couple of hours. How far are you ready to go? And what other targets would you want to aim for?
Well, it is great to be with you, Jen, and I am running to be the next leader of the Liberal Party and the next Prime Minister of Canada, because right now we Canadians have to stand up and fight for our country. If the tariffs are imposed, as Prime Minister, I will fight back with dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs, and our retaliation is going to be surgically targeted to create the maximum pressure on the White House to stop what the Wall Street Journal has described quite rightly as the dumbest trade war in history. An example of a measure that I will put in place as Prime Minister is 100% tariffs on Teslas. I think that should get some attention in the White House. And, Jen, I think Americans, I don't think you think about Canada all that much. But I think when you do think about Canada, you might think, oh, they're smaller than us. Is this really something I should be worried about? Well, the stock market is worried. Shares have gone down, and this has been a terrible year for U.S. stocks already because of these tariff threats. And the reality is, you guys need us. We are your largest market by far. The U.S. sells more to Canada than to China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. So we do have leverage. And as Prime Minister, I will use it. And not because I want to. I mean, the irony about this, the stupidity about this is right now we have a balanced and mutually beneficial relationship. There is a win-win here. There is an exit ramp. But Americans need to know that if you hit Canada, we will hit back, and we will be sure that our retaliation hurts.
I think Americans are very concerned right now about these tariffs that are about to go into place and could impact their bottom line and their cost of goods. Let me ask you, as you just mentioned Elon Musk, I think everybody in this country is learning a lot about his influence, which is unwieldy and over the top, just to say a few words. You mentioned 100% tariffs on Teslas to hit Elon Musk. He owns a number of other companies. Obviously, there's Starlink. Would you ever consider canceling Canada's contracts with Starlink, for example?
Absolutely. And Canadian premiers have already said that they would do that. I think you made a really important point a minute ago, Jen, which is right now, this is maybe abstract for Americans. But if these tariffs are put in place, it is going to hurt Americans. Anyone who has a 401k is going to be hit because the stock market is already hurting. Anyone who needs to fill their car up with gas is going to be hit. You are going to be putting tariffs, a tax on the oil and gas and electricity that we sell you. Totally absurd. Your grocery prices are going to go up because you know what you need to grow food in the United States? You need fertilizer. And 80% of it comes from Canada, and you're going to put a 25% tax on it? I mean, the Wall Street Journal is right. This is dumb. This is utterly self-mutilating, and our retaliation is going to make it worse because we can't stand for these attacks on our economy. So really what I'm saying to you and to your viewers, Jen, is call the White House now. Say to the president, say to your congressmen, say to your senators, say to your governors, this is self-mutilation. This just doesn't make sense. There is no need to do this. But if you follow this path, it's going to hurt America.
It's not every day when you hear a candidate to be the leader of a neighboring country call for people to call the White House and their members of Congress. So that speaks to the significance of the moment. I wanted to turn to Ukraine because I think when I first met you, you were a very well-respected journalist. You spent a lot of time in Ukraine. You covered Russia. This is obviously something I think we're all trying to figure out what's happening and why right now. There are a lot of theories as to why Trump is siding with Putin and badgering Zelensky, to put it one way. Why do you think he is?
Well, I would like to start, Jen, by just being very clear about what we are seeing. And I think it's important to say the scenes that we saw in the Oval Office on Friday were shameful. They were appalling. We saw a U.S. president parroting Kremlin talking points. And I want to be very clear for the record that Putin is a dictator. His invasion of Ukraine is criminal and illegal. Zelensky is the democratically elected president of Ukraine, and Ukrainians are bravely fighting for their democracy and their sovereignty. And by the way, they're doing it alone. We should be grateful to them for fighting for democracy and the rules-based international order, and Canadians certainly are.
Social Security has never missed a payment in more than 80 years, but your benefit checks might not show up next month. The former Social Security Commissioner, Martin O'Malley, warned today that the slash and burn tactics of the world's richest man, Elon Musk, and his Department of Governmental Efficiency would soon disrupt the system. O'Malley saying, quote, "You're going to see the system collapse and an interruption of benefits. I believe you will see that within the next 30 to 90 days. He added, people should start saving now. Just be careful where you save that money, folks, because this afternoon, Donald Trump confirmed that his costly tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico would kick in tomorrow. And stocks immediately plunged off a cliff, with the Dow losing 650 points. And, oh, by the way, tonight, James Dennehy, he was the head of the FBI's New York office. Well, he was forced to resign because he wouldn't help out with the purge of agents who worked on January 6 cases. There's chaos abroad, there's chaos at home, and tomorrow night, the man responsible for it all is coming to your house. Yes, Donald Trump is set to give a joint address to Congress Tuesday night. This is his first since returning to the White House and since he started tearing down not just the guardrails, but the government itself. The last time that he spoke to Congress in 2020, Speaker Nancy Pelosi set the tone for Democrats by tearing up a copy of Trump's speech. But this time around, Democratic leadership seems to want a more demure approach. Democratic leaders, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Chuck Schumer, are pushing members to attend Trump's speech and bring special guests who have been impacted by the administration's government purges. But there are a handful of Democrats that say they may not attend at all, boycotting Trump's speech to drive home one key point: that this is not business as usual. America is on life support, and Donald Trump, he has his hand on the plug. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal is a Democrat out of Washington State, and she joins me now. Congresswoman, let's just start off the top. Are you one of the Democrats that are planning not to attend the president's joint address to Congress tomorrow? And if you are, why? And if not, why not?
It is so good to see you, Simone. And look, I am still deciding because I think there are reasons to attend and reasons not to attend. I do have a terrific State of the Union guest. The president of the Flight Attendants Association is coming with me, Sarah Nelson, and we're going to talk about the effects on public safety and people who are taking planes, and yet we're seeing Elon Musk, fire all of these workers who actually keep our skies safe. But I think that your point is well taken. This is an unprecedented situation. This is a situation where Elon Musk and Donald Trump are stealing from the American people, from Medicaid, from Social Security, from all of the things that actually matter, just so they can give tax breaks to billionaires and destroy our government, destroy the very entity that is responsible for making sure that people have a fair shot and, are able to have a functioning country. So this is serious, and I think whatever our response is tomorrow, and we'll see exactly what that looks like, it is going to need to meet the moment, and it's going to need to respond to our constituents, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats alike, who are deeply worried, concerned that Donald Trump is betraying the middle class, working class people across this country.
Well, Congresswoman, we're seeing that in town halls all over the country. And so respond to the constituents. The constituents would say this is not business as usual, and they want their Democratic members to do something. I'm struck by your answer with the and also adding this letter from the leader, Jeffries, within the last hour. It was a dear colleague. It says, from Democrats, again, it's two Democrats from House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. The first notable thing here is the decision to attend the joint session is a personal one, and we understand that members will come to different conclusions. However, it's important to have a strong, determined, and dignified Democratic presence in the chamber. And then next, he goes on to note throughout the week, there's a series of events planned in connection with President Trump's speech beyond the traditional Democratic response. Jeffries says that Democrats will be engaging media all day tomorrow. Congresswoman, what was the conversation inside the caucus meeting? Take us in there, because I just tell us what you can, because it strikes me that there are some folks that are saying, look, we must go and attend because this is what we do, and we can't have a strong presence and a strong, forceful pushback if we're not in the chamber. But then there are other members who are saying, what do you mean? If we're saying that they are raiding the federal government and trampling on the civil liberties of good government workers and people all across this country, how can we sit in the chamber like business as usual?
Yes, and I'm not going to speak for other people, but I'll just tell you the way I see it is that this time around, we know exactly what he's going to do. We know that he's going to lie, that he's going to be completely divorced from reality in terms of what he describes, and that he's going to have a unanimous Republican side cheering him on and standing up for everything. If you do not have Democrats in the room, I think you could have this scenario where they fill all the seats with Republicans and their staff member, and it looks like there's no pushback at all. So I'm just giving you the straight answer for why somebody would make that argument. At the same time, for me, I think it is very important that if I am in the chamber, that I have a way to call out his lies, that I have a way to be very clear about the things that he is doing and saying, and it's not easy to figure out what this balance is. So I will give our leadership that, but I think it is important that the conversation is about what he is doing to the American people and the lies that he is telling. And whether we're boycotting it or whether we're in the chamber, I think that is the most important thing. Let's not let him get away with, just going up there and saying things that are completely not true, while he has done absolutely nothing, Simone, to actually lower the costs for working people across this country. He has
the eggs are still high.
Nothing. Yes,
the price of eggs are still high. Can I ask you, Congresswoman, before I lose you, speaking of doing something for the American people and things that directly affect them, Social Security has not missed a payment in decades, and now you have former Governor Martin O'Malley, also the former Commissioner Administrator of the Social Security Administration, saying that next month the checks might not come through. Is this threat to Social Security real, and what should people at home know?
It is absolutely real. Republicans have said they want to cut Social Security, and they're going to do it in all kinds of ways. They're going to try to make you think it's about waste, fraud, and abuse. But let me tell you, if they fire over 1,000 Social Security workers, people are not going to get their checks. As it is, our office gets calls all the time from people because there aren't enough operators, there aren't enough workers at Social Security. Republicans have managed to continue to strip away at the most popular program that Americans love. And so this is another way for them to destroy Social Security. And the impact is going to be, you're not going to get your Social Security check on time. You are going to have to spend even more time than you already do trying to find out what is going on and how you're going to make housing price, make your rental payment for that month if you don't get your Social Security check. So people are going to feel the effects of this, and this is exactly what's happening with Medicaid right now as well. It's also what's going to happen with Medicare. They are decimating and stealing from people on the programs and services that people rely on across this country. And they are using it to pay for tax breaks for billionaires. That is not right, and we're not going to stand for it.
All right, we'll leave it there. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, thank you. You can feel free to text me and let me know if you end up deciding what you're going to do.
I'll let you know.
Appreciate your time.
There's some really significant breaking news to tell you about on the FBI front. The head of the New York field office, James Dennehy, has retired under intense pressure. He had tangled with the Trump administration over their demand that the names of all FBI agents who worked on or touched any January 6 cases be handed over. In a letter to staff earlier this month that we covered on this program, Dennehy had written this, quote, "Today we find ourselves in the middle of a battle of our own, as good people are being walked out of the FBI and others are being targeted because they did their jobs in accordance with the law and FBI policy." He added this, quote, "Time for me to dig in," end quote. That list of names was eventually handed over. Two sources tell NBC News that Dennehy was given a choice to retire or be fired, and he chose to retire earlier today. Let's bring into our coverage former top official, the Department of Justice, former FBI General Counsel, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissmann, also joining us at the table, the co-founder and CEO of Rappler, the leading digital media and news organization in the Philippines, the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021, the author of, quote, "How to Stand Up to a Dictator, The Fight for Our Future." Maria Ressa is back. She's also a board member of the Committee to Protect Journalists. Someone who's talked us through these times, and we're gonna get to the journalism front, but we start here at the FBI. A big blow.
Big blow. This is somebody who, just like we saw in the prosecutor's office in New York, the prosecutor's office in Main Justice, the prosecutor's office in D.C., it's useful to remember, this sort of resistance started at the FBI. And this is sort of the next rung below the director and the deputy director. All of the assistant directors, the heads of the field offices, of which this fellow is the largest field office in the Bureau. This is sort of the crown jewel. I say that not just as a native New Yorker. I mean, it really has the most people, has the most work. It is the core of the terrorism program, is here. And this is somebody who basically had to be forced out by the Trump administration because he was, by all accounts, saying, you know what, I was trained to believe in facts and law. So it's, again, another sign of where we are. It's really important to see this as part of that larger story as to what's going on in the administration writ large, but it's certainly within the Department of Justice. I cannot stress to you, Nicole, how unusual this is. The only other time I can think of anyone of note leaving the department because of being asked to do something that they viewed as against the law or just not supported by the facts was in the first Trump administration. But that was a small group of people. This is full bore. And to me, that is just exactly representative of the difference between where we were in Trump 1.0 and where we are now.
And what would Kash Patel and Dan Bongino want that Dennehy couldn't have given them if he'd run that office?
Somebody who was going to be fact-based and law-based and was saying that out loud. Remember, this is exactly what Denise Chung, the head of the criminal division, was saying to her boss and to the Deputy Attorney General's office, which was the facts do not support it and the law does not support it. And what's remarkable is that is a firing offense. Just to remember what Mr. Dennehy, Special Agent Dennehy's position was, it was that there is nothing wrong with having worked on the investigation of people who participated in the January 6th insurrection. We all saw that. It's worth noting. This isn't misconduct. It would be a dereliction of duty not to have done those cases. And the idea, just remember, this is a public servant with a long career, not just at the FBI, but in the military, who is sitting there saying, I can't stomach this. I mean, it's remarkable.
But he didn't. They're printing. This is real news, real breaking news in the making. When it makes me stammer, I can see the story coming out the printer. He's putting out publicly that he was forced out. I want to read to you from his resignation message. Eddie, you have that? Thank you. This is how it happens. Sorry, not so glamorous. In his retirement message to colleagues, former head of the FBI New York field office says he was forced out. Quote, I've been told many times in my life, when you find yourself in a hole, sometimes it's best to quit digging. Screw that. I will never stop defending this joint. Full message, all. Quote, late Friday, I was informed that I needed to put my retirement papers in today, which I just did. I was not given a reason for this decision. Regardless, I apologize to all of you for not being able to fulfill my commitment to you to serve as ADICNY. What's that?
Assistant Director in Charge. They're one of 3 people, the largest field offices in the country: New York, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles. I can't stress enough how big and important a job is. But for sort of the director and the deputy director, I mean, this is the most important position in the department.
Let me read his message in full then. As I leave today, I have an immense feeling of pride to have represented an office of professionals who will always do the right thing for the right reasons, who will always seek the truth while upholding the rule of law, who will always follow the facts no matter where they lead and be unapologetic about it, who will never bend, break, falter, or quit on your integrity, who will always handle cases and evidence with an overabundance of caution and care for the innocent, the victims, and the process first, and who will always remain independent. With that, here is my final top 10 list. Top 10 things I'll miss about the FBI. The commute to work, not. The investigations, doesn't matter what squad you are on, the work is the best in the world. The intensity. You have to be in it to realize what I mean. But we all know how significant what we do is. The FBI brand. Do not fret. Those 3 letters still mean something. And there's only a select group of folks in this world, past and present, who can say they're with the FBI. Be proud of that. The camaraderie within our own bureau family and with all law enforcement, local, state, federal, and international. There is no better fraternity in the world. The opportunity to put on a suit and tie to conduct interviews in the morning, throw on some street clothes to conduct surveillance in the afternoon, debrief a sensitive source at a safe house overnight, and then get up early for a SWAT arrest the next morning. Then rinse and repeat. The badge, what it took to earn it and what it means to carry it. The independence. We will not bend. We will not falter. We will not sacrifice what is right for anything or anyone. 2, the impact. Our work helps shape foreign policy, community awareness, international relations, wartime decisions, and public safety every single day. Number 1, all of you, every single one of you who has earned your position within this phenomenal organization. I've been told many times in my life, when you find yourself in a hole, sometimes it's best to quit digging. Screw that. I will never stop defending this joint. I'll just do it willingly and proudly from outside the wire. Wow.
Nicole, when you were in government and I was in government, when you were seeing leaders, what you had sort of front and center was looking at people like this and figuring out, how do I support their mission? And how do I sort of get out of their way? And what do they need operationally? And statement sort of gives you a sense of the people, the mission of the FBI.
Can I press you, though? What do you want if you don't want him?
Exactly. I mean,
but say it. What do you want if you don't want that person?
To me, it means that you want somebody who's going to just do whatever you say. Remember, the FBI is trained on facts and it's trained on law. It has to go to court. It has to also look at themselves in the mirror. If you do not want this, it is because you are looking at a system which does not believe in facts and does not believe in law. And you don't need just this example. It's the reason you see so many people quitting, saying, I can't do this. But it's the same reason that you see attacks on judges who say you can't do this. It's the same reason you see attacks on the media calling it out. It's the same reason you see on the international stage not believing in the international rule of law, of denigrating all of their systems. It is when you believe only in transactions and you believe only in the law of the jungle, this is what you get. And this is such a heartfelt example that gives people insight into what the FBI is, but also a real insight into the people who are denigrating it.
I just think quickly, our mission in this moment is to have our eyes wide open and cut right to the bone of the truth. And the truth is, if you're against these 10 things, you're against the rule of law. And that's what's at the FBI right now.
Absolutely. I mean, the two things you've said, facts and law. That's the foundation of every institution, of every democracy, right? And I think as the FBI has come under attack, kudos to Special Agent Dennehy for his position. He's a whistleblower, as are all the others who have resigned. And I think our task as journalists is going to be to dig deep. What forced them to resign in principle, on principle? This was something we didn't have in the Philippines. We had a president in 2016 who just pulled loyalty and was able to, within a short period of time, move the Philippines from allying with the United States to China and Russia, without telling our ministry, our Secretary of Foreign Affairs and our Foreign Affairs Department. But I think this is, for America today, it's exactly what you said, Nicole. What we're seeing is the utter transformation of institutions that are getting weaker by the second as men and women resign, who are standing by facts and rule of law.
NOAA is 12,000 experts here to help, to fly into hurricanes, to deploy underwater sensors, to train models predicting tomorrow or 2100. We need to let NOAA's staff continue its mission. We need to let them continue delivering.
That was Dr. Sarah Cooley. Until recently, she was a scientist at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is the part of the federal government that does, little things that anybody can do. Tracking hurricanes and tornadoes and tsunamis, stuff you can do at home. Hundreds of scientists like Dr. Cooley were fired from NOAA last week, part of Trump and his top campaign donor indiscriminately eliminating whole parts of the U.S. government, especially the parts we use. Dr. Cooley, along with about 1,000 other former NOAA employees and supporters and just members of the public and Democratic members of Congress and the U.S. Senate, all stood outside NOAA headquarters today, just outside D.C., to protest all those firings, to protest those weather forecasters and scientists who have just been fired from their jobs. They held up signs that said, "Save NOAA." Firing the scientists creates a bleep storm. There was also another protest in D.C. today. This was to defend the federal government as well, just a few miles down the road. This one was for employees for the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Employees there were ordered by the White House to stop all of their work. They held this rally not at CFPB headquarters, but outside the federal courthouse in D.C., where a court fight is underway, challenging the legality of that stop work order. This crowd gathered today outside the McPherson Square metro station in D.C. It's the closest metro stop to the White House. It's also right near the headquarters of the VA, Veterans Affairs. These protesters were there to support all the people who are still employed by the U.S. government and people who are employed, especially at the VA, people just holding up signs and applauding for them. thanking them on their way to work. The signs they're holding say federal workers are heroes. This was all today. This was over the weekend in D.C., a big crowd turning out for a transgender unity rally. They started in front of the U.S. Capitol. They marched to the White House. It was also another weekend of protests at Tesla dealerships all over the country, protesting what the president has assigned his top campaign donor to do to the federal government. There were big protests at Tesla dealerships in Tucson, Arizona, and in Boston, Massachusetts, and in Springfield, New Jersey, and in Superior, Colorado. Also at the Tesla dealership in New York City on the west side of Manhattan, there was a really big protest there. There were actually 9 people arrested at that protest. There was also a big protest targeting another company owned by the president's top campaign donor. This was SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California this weekend, right near the LAX airport in Southern California. Lots of people turned out there. This guy came dressed as Elon Vader. Donald, I am your daddy. Congresswoman Maxine Waters turned up at that protest as well. The SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne is in her district. This was Dublin, California this weekend, right near where I grew up in the East Bay. Members of the community there protesting against the use of a closed correctional facility as a detention center for ICE. There's also a big march in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania this weekend, protesting the massive indiscriminate cuts to the federal workforce. There was another protest for federal workers in San Francisco this weekend. A crowd hung an upside-down flag across from the Golden Gate Bridge. Protesters also lined up along the side of the road this weekend outside President Trump's club in Palm Beach, Florida. Then there's also what happened in the national parks this weekend. Check this out. This was in Yosemite National Park in California, also on the edge of the Grand Canyon in Arizona, at the St. Louis Arch in Missouri, at Bar Harbor, Maine, just outside Acadia National Park. There were Save Our Parks protests at more than 100 different national parks all over the country this weekend, protesting the firing of parks employees by the Trump White House. And when I say it was all over the country, I mean it. They were really all over the place. This was Denali National Park in Alaska, the Arches National Park in Utah, Valley Forge National Historic Park in Pennsylvania. Those folks standing out in the snow were protesting at the Indiana Dunes National Park. This was outside Rocky Mountain National Park in northern Colorado. People lined up on the side of the road holding Save Our Parks signs so people could see them on their drive into the park. Because of the firing of park staff by Donald Trump, the staff at Rocky Mountain National Park has announced that they are not going to be able to keep that park open this summer. They will not have enough people. That is the 5th most visited national park in the entire country. They say they will be closed this summer because of Trump's firing their staff. Some protesters scaled this cliff inside the park and hung an upside-down flag, a symbol of distress. You will remember protesters did a similar thing in Yosemite a few weeks ago, hanging that upside-down flag. We not only saw it again in Colorado this weekend, we also saw it at Joshua Tree National Park in California and off the second Flatiron in Boulder, Colorado. So lots and lots going on this weekend. The American people are making themselves heard. They are showing up. Also this weekend, the vice president decided to take a vacation. He brought his family to Waitsfield, Vermont this weekend to go skiing at Sugarbush. Waiting for him at the ski resort were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of angry Vermonters telling them how much they support Ukraine and how much they do not support J.D. Vance, especially after his insulting display of Russian talking points in the Oval Office with the president of Ukraine. Some of these signs are very memorable. J.D. Vance, Zelensky is 10 times the man you are. This one, we saw a number of different iterations of this one this weekend. Vance is a traitor. Go ski in Russia. Also, I don't ski, so I assume this is some cardinal sin of the slopes. I don't know. It says Vance skis in jeans. Again, I don't know, but sounds bad. It wasn't just Vermont that showed their support for Ukraine. There were tons of actually pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia, anti-Trump, anti-Vance protests all over the weekend. We've got more on that ahead with a live report from our Pentagon correspondent coming up as we're starting to absorb this news that the U.S. is not only dropping sanctions against Russia and cutting off all aid to Ukraine, but also ordering a U.S. military cyber command stand down in all of its operations against Russia.
Foreign leaders are rallying around President Zelensky, not out of context with what has been a years-long European alliance for Ukraine and against what is seen as a Russian war of aggression and invasion, but also in direct response to what you see on your screen, the way that the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States invited this leader for a discussion of issues that reasonable people can acknowledge are difficult, that there is not only one single side to this, but there are some baseline facts, like the fact that a dictator, Vladimir Putin, led an invasion of a country that is a Western ally. Those baseline facts were sort of shunted to the side as these two U.S. officials berated the Ukrainian wartime leader, and also didn't get anything out of it for the region or for the United States, even if you look at it on just national terms. Zelensky now gathering in London with the European allies at the invitation of the UK Prime Minister, and they are advocating what they quite deliberately, I should say, call a coalition of the willing. If you're saying, oh, yeah, I think that foreign policy phrase rings a bell, well, they are calling it that as a kind of embrace of Ukraine, but also rebuttal or foreign policy shade against the United States. And they are saying there are ways to do something that many people still want to do in this region, end the war with Russia on terms that are acceptable and that do not, in the views of European allies and in the view of Ukraine, wipe out all of the hard work and resistance and, of course, resources and lives lost. So, one leader there in the UK calls it a, quote, crossroads in history, with Europe facing now an obligation to do the heavy lifting regardless of what the United States under Donald Trump might do differently than not only the last few years of support for Ukraine, but the last few decades of support for the NATO alliance, which quite explicitly stands up to the Russian autocratic force in the region. And that was long before the Ukrainian invasion. As for President Trump, here is what he is saying.
Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin.
And many Republicans are trying to walk a line here. You know, we've all lived through this, so we know that on, say, domestic issues, which are often quite simple, right? Red and blue teams, and Republicans who used to say whatever about a domestic issue will flip for Trump because he's the president on Team Red. Foreign policy can be more complicated, and quite frankly, some Republicans, like Mitch McConnell or Lindsey Graham historically, have said, well, we'll be team players on everything but matters of fundamental foreign policy principle because we're fighting, in some cases, autocrats or nuclear armed powers or et cetera. So what do we have now after this, honestly, spectacle in the Oval Office? Well, here's what we're hearing.
What we don't have right now is President Zelensky saying, I am ready to take the steps necessary and have the conversations necessary and make the compromises.
What I saw in the Oval Office was disrespectful, and I don't know if we can ever do business with Zelensky again.
Either he needs to come to his senses and come back to the table in gratitude, or someone else needs to lead the country to do that.
This talking point about gratitude from a foreign policy or factually substantive perspective is not very serious. There are valid criticisms of how Ukraine has proceeded and whether the United States, in a more sort of nationalistic or conservative, if you want to call it that view, might say, hey, we want to get to some deal. We want to give out more goodies to Russia, but still try to end the war. Anyone who's ever covered any ceasefire in any region knows that there are complexities, even when you are standing by an ally. Even Biden officials would say that about aspects of dealing with Ukraine. I'm not here to tell you something is more simple or black and white than it is. But this idea that a longtime ally who has said over and over to both parties, because there have been Republicans historically who've supported Ukraine and these efforts and funding, this ally and this leader has spoken to this Congress and spoken to this country and done American media and done diplomacy. So it is just not factual to say there's been no long-term gratitude. What was apparently missing from the meeting was the reality show, television-style, thankful surrender or obsequiousness that was demanded. And even if that were given in that two-on-one, very uncomfortable exchange to watch, it's not clear that they would have had a better outcome or gone on with the bilat or everything else that you probably remember from following this story Friday into the weekend. As for the Republicans, well, we continue to see this shift. Take the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who sat on the couch in a way that got a lot of attention for a kind of energy that maybe he didn't want to be there. Now, again, we're journalists. We can't tell you what was inside his head, but plenty of people kind of observed the tension. And then we also know what I can show you, not what was in his head on Friday, but what has been his position publicly as an official, as a Republican, as a person who votes on things in the Senate for years, including much criticism of authoritarian leader Vladimir Putin.
Vladimir Putin's not a president. He's a dictator.
We've spent 3 years calling Vladimir Putin names. That's not the point. The point that we're at now is we're trying to get the man to a table.
No matter what, there always has to be a real, legitimate Ukrainian state that we have a relationship with.
He found every opportunity to try to Ukraine-splain on every issue. Apologize for turning this thing into the fiasco for him that it became.
Once people learn the true nature of Vladimir Putin, my hope is that he'll change his opinion and his views.
Shouldn't we all be happy that we have a president who's trying to stop wars and prevent them instead of start them?
The obvious problem for Marco Rubio is his public record. So we actually know when he was speaking, I guess, for himself or based on his foreign policy views, what he said. And there's the old saying, this is what democracy looks like. Well, I guess this is what MAGA diplomacy looks like. And in fairness, Marco Rubio is not the first or last person who's taken a job where you work in the administration or for a president so that you then reflect their views. But are we reaching a point of principle where some individuals may say, sure, you have to represent the president, but if the foreign policy choices here are wrong, and you've said so, and they're some of the most important ways that we exercise U.S. power, then why are you doing the opposite of what you said you believe? That would be a question for officials in that position, in all fairness. Meanwhile, Russia has clearly benefited from aspects of this, and the Kremlin is taking one of its victory laps. They say Trump is rapidly changing all foreign policy configurations to largely align with our, that is the Putin government's, vision. Now, the Russian foreign minister also praised Trump for what they're calling the common sense view, which is their way of saying thanks for agreeing with Russia. The New York Times reporting the shift after President Trump spoke with Putin on the phone. This reportedly occurred about 3 weeks ago, with Trump picking up the phone on February 12th for this 90-minute chat with Putin. And since then, the Times reports he's called Zelensky a dictator, falsely accused Ukraine of a role in the war that they don't have. I'm not actually going to repeat the exact word, but you can follow this. I'll just say Russia started this war by invading Ukraine. And then the Times notes they pressed the Ukrainian leader to accede to the administration's demands. We also have indications that on February 12th, Trump was saying Ukraine would just not recover all its territory. Now, again, he is the sitting president. He can make predictions and he can say things. But we are talking about a long-term U.S. ally that has exceeded almost all expectations, including our own intelligence agencies, in outlasting what were those first few tough days and weeks of the war. So for a sitting president to just say they're going to lose turf or they're going to lose aspects of the war is itself striking. We want to remind you as we go through the facts that Trump broke ranks with the G7. This was on February 13th, saying Russia could rejoin. In his view, remember, it was Russian aggression, which Trump also mentioned in that hot meeting on Friday, that led the G7 to expel Russia. It was for, again, going in and taking territory. In that case, the 2014 invasion of Crimea. Now, the U.S. also sided with Russia on a UN vote about condemning Russia's invasion. That was just last week. The conservative Wall Street Journal editorial board is warning that Trump seems mainly concerned with rehabilitating Putin in world councils. Over at the Pentagon, we're told that under the Trump administration, the relatively new defense secretary has ordered the suspension of offensive cyber operations against Russia. That's one of those things that the United States has done, trying to level up or have consequences without starting a hot war. The Times reports it's part of a broader effort to draw Putin into talks on Ukraine and a new relationship with the U.S. under Trump. Now, as with so many things, Donald Trump, you get some people who say, well, if he did it, it's bad. You get some people who say if he did it, it's okay. And that's not really a good way or an honest way for us to all deal with this. I've told you in other reports there are things the Trump administration has done that may work for certain people in certain ways. There's other things they've claimed they're going to do on immigration where they're not succeeding. They're deporting fewer people in these first 5 weeks than the Biden rate. So we're going to follow the facts. I've told you that's one of the key things we have to do here. And if you follow the facts on that Friday meeting and you put aside the antis and the brainwashed, the people who say it's always good or it's always bad, what you actually see is, whether you look at the Wall Street Journal editorial board or national security experts or have just any knowledge of the history of the transatlantic alliance, what we saw was an absolutely extreme anti-Ukrainian, pro-Putin-esque effort to deride the Ukrainian war resistance and to try to get something which, as of now, they haven't gotten, right? They didn't say, oh, we played hardball and then got something. So then you can look at Trump's own national security advisors. Not that they're the only people with expertise, but they are people who've sat in that room and understand how this president may approach things and think, and have the knowledge to draw on to say what happened on Friday. Was this some grand strategy? The president ended the meeting by saying it was great television. Was this some pre-concocted effort to get something done on the public stage, or was it something else? I want to show you a Trump veteran saying that it was Putin getting his way.
He appeals to President Trump's sense of aggrievement, right? That, Donald, like me, you've been treated so unfairly. And he's been very successful at it because he's a master manipulator and one of the best liars in the world.
You seem to be saying that President Trump is being played.
He is being played.
That's a view from the inside, from someone who had enough belief and support for Donald Trump to work for him.